Welcome back to The Social. There is no doubt about it. The ongoing pandemic has been really difficult for a lot of people, and there's now growing evidence that it's having a significant impact on young people when it comes to their mental health.
Our next guests know this firsthand as a recent university grad and a psychologist supporting and advocating for children and youth. Welcome to the show, Emma O'Hare and Dr. Joanna Henderson.
Hi. Hello.
Thank you both for being here. And Emma, we want to start with you. Depression is something that you've dealt with from a very young age. I'm curious, when did you first start feeling that there might be something going on? And can you describe some of the symptoms that you were experiencing at that time?
Yeah. I began feeling off around the age of 8. However, I didn't have the words to understand or explain it. I didn't feel enjoyment or motivation to hang out with friends or to participate in extracurricular activities, and it became increasingly difficult to get out of bed in the morning. I cried every morning. It was a challenge not only to get me to school, but to keep me at school. And in retrospect, I've always suffered with anxiety. When I was about 4 years old, I had bald patches from pulling out my hair, and at this period in my life, around 8 years old, I just lost my aunt to cancer. My mom was diagnosed with cancer, and my dad had just had a major accident. So it was chalked up by doctors as feelings that fit the situation and puberty, but I was only 8, so that didn't really add up. I continued to see a psychologist. However, I wasn't seeing meaningful results. And at the age of 12, I wrote my parents a letter that expressed my inability to see beyond my illness and the guilt and shame that I felt. I didn't know what suicide was per se, but I did know that I didn't want to live. I was hopeless.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Emma. I know that's very likely not easy for you. Dr. Henderson, sad to say, as difficult as it is to listen to Emma's story, it's something that I know you hear a lot in your practice and the young people that you work with. So how common is this?
Yes, and also just to say thank you to Emma for sharing your story. I think it's really important for people to be able to see themselves and the world around them, and thank you so much for doing that. Unfortunately, it is very common. As many as 1 in 5, and even some reports are 1 in 4 children and adolescents and young adults will experience significant mental health concerns. And of course, with the pandemic, we're seeing increases in those rates of distress amongst young people.
Obviously, there are so many contributing factors when it comes to depression, but we know that social media has had an impact and has changed, for sure, the numbers when it comes to depression. So, Dr. Henderson, do you have any tips for parents watching on how to help their children navigate this world?
For sure. So, bullying is bullying, no matter where it happens, and that includes on social media. And ensuring that all the adults in a young person's life are aware of bullying that might be taking place and responding appropriately is one piece. But we also need to take a step back and think in terms of how are we as adults modeling appropriate social media behavior. And I think that's a space where almost every parent can take action. If you're on social media, think about your own social media use. So it's quite likely that children and adolescents are going to face difficult exposure to difficult material on social media. So understanding that from the outset and helping your kids and adolescents to develop the skills they need to interact with social media safely, to know what to do when they face disturbing content or inappropriate content, and then also really taking some action around limiting their use of social media. Making sure they get time away from social media, that especially for young kids, that the phone isn't in the bedroom overnight, those kinds of things.
Okay. Emma, you shared your experience so eloquently with us. And I want to know, when you look back, what was it like navigating the early days as a child? And were your peers at all capable of providing any support or understanding?
Thank you. It certainly wasn't easy to navigate, especially as a young child who had very little lived experience and perspective. I went to a very small school, and there wasn't much awareness or acceptance about anything related to mental health. I was often excluded from plans because I didn't show up to school regularly. And when I did show up, I was ridiculed by my peers for missing so much class. But what my peers didn't know was that there was so much going on under the surface. I didn't want to go to school. I found it difficult to focus with this mental fog that I felt. But because I'd missed so much class, it often made it even harder to come back. However, I'm very lucky that I got to go home to a loving environment where I was supported and encouraged and validated. And it was never taboo in my house. We talked openly about it like you would talk about a broken bone or a hurt knee.
Well, that is such a silver lining in all of this. Well, you were, Emma, you've graduated university now, as we said off the top, but you were in your third year of university when this pandemic hit. So what was it like navigating the pressure of your education in this pandemic, which we're still in?
Yeah, I don't do so well with change, so it's certainly tough. I moved back home just before heading into final exams in my third year and finished my last year completely online. I did hold on to hope that maybe my final semester we'd be back at school, but that didn't happen. So I struggled with the reality of that and coming to terms with it. Finishing school at home was tough because until that point, I had studied at school and I had associated home with the holidays and not doing work. So it became increasingly difficult to stay motivated, especially considering all my classes were asynchronous. But also the feeling of camaraderie that you get at school. There's this sense of togetherness, especially around exams. Like, yeah, we're miserable right now, but at least we're all miserable together. So it's really hard to have that perspective when everything's online.
I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned this, that the online, because so many kids across this country have gone through that. So, Dr. Henderson, what has been the impact on kids' mental health, the pandemic, and the disruptions to school?
Yeah, the impacts have been significant, both in terms of young people who came into the pandemic with pre-existing mental health concerns. The majority have reported significant worsening. And then we have new young people who are experiencing new mental health difficulties. Of course, no one sort of narrative or story describes all young people. There are young people who have fared well in the context of online education, for example. But by and large, young people have really struggled in terms of the isolation, the unpredictability, the lack of opportunity to engage in all kinds of, healthy behaviors, healthy activities like sports or arts, those kinds of things as well.
Well, what a valuable conversation, I think, for everybody listening. Emma, I want to start with you and thanking you for sharing so many of your experiences. I know you're going to help a lot of people out there listening today, and I think a lot of people will feel less alone listening to your story, so thank you.
Thank you.
And Dr. Henderson, thank you as well. You've got so much deep knowledge, and you're doing such important work in the community, so we appreciate everything that you're doing as well.
You're welcome.
And we are going to take a very quick break. We'll be back right after this.